everyone, so today I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about my biggest critiques and concerns for Diablo IV. Now, if you saw the review that we put up yesterday, you'll know that my overall impressions of the game are very good. Like, I quite like D4, I think it's a real solid foundation that they're launching with, and if Blizzard gets the seasons right with meaningful updates, additions, and improvements, I think it has a great chance at longevity. But even without any of that, I still feel pretty satisfied with what we're getting at a base game, what it has to offer, and I am very much so looking forward to playing over the next few weeks. Like, it's gonna be a blast. I absolutely cannot wait. That said, yes, there are some parts of Diablo IV that I really don't love, I think could use improvement, and some things that I wish were already in the game, but they're not, and so the hope is that they eventually come later down the road. Okay, so let's jump right into it. My first major critique would definitely be the game's difficulty. Overall, it just doesn't feel very challenging. Now, when I mentioned this in the review, people pointed out, hey, well then why did you recommend people play on World Tier 1? So that recommendation is specifically for while playing through the campaign, if and only if your goal is to reach endgame as quickly as possible. If that isn't your goal and you just want a more challenging leveling experience as you play through the story, then yes, absolutely bump it up to World Tier 2. That's gonna make it take longer to kill everything, which will as such have you engaging with every pack of monsters that much more, and it should make combat feel a bit more rewarding. But what I'm actually referring to when I say that the game doesn't feel difficult overall is I'm talking about when you're playing on the highest world tiers. Because yes, once you do finish the campaign, you will want to be jumping and playing in world tiers 3 and 4 as soon as possible, and that is where you're going to be staying, because that is where you actually have access to the endgame activities of nightmare dungeons and hell tides, and it's also how you start getting those higher tiers of items, the sacred items and the uniques. And from our experience so far, playing in those tiers, it really doesn't stay hard for very long. When you first make the jump, and if you're not geared up, your damage and survivability will be a bit low. But then after just a couple of hours and a bump in your item level, quickly becomes a cakewalk. I think the perfect showcase of how easy it is, even in World Tier 4, is just the fact that how quickly we can clear boss fights. Both the end of dungeon bosses that you see, but also the world bosses were dying very quickly and without much difficulty on World Tier 4, while we were not even max level. I mean, the fact that this is happening on the highest world tier, that's a bit of a shame. And the point of this is that even on that highest difficulty, all of those open world encounters really don't take too long before they become something that you just smash through. Since everything in the open world scales to your level, once you get the gear level and you have the account progression, you know, your Paragon boards and all of that, once that gets to a certain point, everything is just super easy from that point forward. Now, with that said, the nightmare dungeons are an entirely different story, as those keep pushing higher and higher, and they remain a challenging activity, seemingly all the way up to 100, we're assuming. So this is where we were actually presented with continuous bumps in difficulty. I just kind of wish that the rest of the game, especially all of that open world, and especially the open world bosses, didn't become so trivial so quickly, because there's a lot of content there. Like, the open world is a big bulk of the game. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, and I would have loved if it remained a challenge all the way up to level 100, but as it stands, seems like once you get to around level 60, and especially as you get closer to 70, even on World Tiers 4, the open world is going to become a breeze, and the only challenge is going to be in the nightmare dungeons. Now, my second biggest concern is the fact that we haven't yet mentioned today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Dungeon Fighter Online. This is a free-to-play 2D MMORPG beat-em-up with retro pixel graphics. It combines classic side-scrolling action with RPG elements and is known for its fast-paced gameplay and extensive character customization. In DFO, you can choose from more than 60 class advancements with unique abilities and progression paths to suit any style. Other features include PvP with ranked matchmaking, where skilled players can compete for recognition. It's also got advanced and Legion dungeons with their own special rewards for clearing. The most recent update to Dungeon Fighter Online, called the Archmage's Hall of Dimensions, is coming out on May 30th. This adds 5 new unique boss monsters that can be played in 4 different difficulties, rewarding special equipment which can be fused, enhancing your characters. If you are new and want to catch up, you can reach level 100 through the fast leveling mode, receiving special missions and rewards for every level, with even more missions available after 100. To learn more about Dungeon Fighter Online and check it out for yourself, go ahead and use my link in the description description below. Okay, welcome back. Now let's go ahead and get on to the real second major concern, and that is that the boss fights are too easy. Now this might sound a lot like the first critique, but hold on a second. It is different because I'm actually not referring this time to like the amount of health the bosses have or the amount of damage they do. I'm just specifically talking about boss mechanics. Pretty much every single boss fight in Diablo 4 can be boiled down to two things. One, don't get hit by the melee attack or spell, and two, don't stand in the fire. If you complete those two objectives, you just deal damage to the boss until their health bar reaches 0. Outside of that, the only other real mechanics I ever came across in boss fights, there were 3 of them. 1, you would get these totems that sometimes appeared and they would chain you to the ground. 2, there were some encounters, I think 2 of them, where the play space would shrink over time, making you closer and closer to the boss fight. And then the third type of boss mechanic that I've seen is some invulnerability where you have to usually kill some sort of structure or some sort of NPCs before you can start damaging the boss again. All 3 of those additional things were showing up very rarely in boss fights. For the most part, pretty much every boss is just a DPS and a survivability check. And there are very few additional layers of mechanics. And I was just really expecting and hoping for a lot more here. You know, since Diablo 3 came out over these past 10 years, there have just been so many other loot games that have showcased some real impressive boss fight mechanics. Other ARPGs, MMOs, and looter shooters that have done this really well. And we've learned that there's just such a wide variety of potential skill checks and fail states and other mechanics, things that you can add to boss fights beyond giving them more health or beyond giving them one-shots or having them deal more damage. What are you talking about, Force? Isn't it all just get rid of move out of the fire and attack the boss? No, here's some examples. You can have a boss that debuffs players, one member of the party, or if you're playing by yourself, they'll debuff you and you have to cleanse, or else it'll one-shot you or add a damage over time or make the boss fight more difficult by boosting them up. Having items in the play space or interactables in the environment that you must engage with during certain phases of the boss fight, that's another layer. Requiring precise positioning for certain attacks or phases, or that can even be applied into the debuff thing where these multiple layers of mechanics are stacked on top of each other. And then having things like enrage mechanics where if you don't meet a specific condition, for example, if you don't get the boss to a certain phase by a set amount of time, the boss gets stronger, making it more difficult. It doesn't have to be a hard fail, but more things to engage with, more mechanics would be great. Now, I'm not saying that boss fights in Diablo 4 have to be to the level of complexity of like MMO raids, right? It doesn't need to be like WoW raids or Final Fantasy 14 raids, or it doesn't even have to be like the mechanics we see in Lost Ark, although I would love some of that splashed in here and there. I just think there's a lot of things that could work really well in Diablo 4 that would add extra layers of difficulty and ways to approach these boss fights that I would appreciate, but just really isn't there. Right now, boss fights in D4 are pretty much deal damage, don't get hit by the attack, and don't stand in the fire. That's 99% of the fights that you'll come across when playing in this game. The fact that Liam was like face tanking world bosses, not even with a care in the world, it shouldn't be that way, right? It would be great if it wasn't that way and there was more to it. So I definitely think there's a lot of room for improvement here when they add future bosses down the road. If they could include more skill checks, more fail states, more mechanics, things beyond deal damage and don't get hit. My third major critique would be around the inventory management. So while playing the game, your inventory will fill up very quickly. Usually anytime I did a major activity, my inventory would be full and I'd have to go back to town, making regular trips to dismantle or sell off whatever I was carrying. If I did a single nightmare dungeon, if I did a round of Tree of Whisper quest, if I went into a Helltide, anytime I did like one solid endgame activity, I would usually have to visit a vendor or the blacksmith. Now, sure, this could just be alleviated by not picking up a lot of items, but honestly, I don't really feel like that's an option, especially with how important yellow gear is in Diablo 4. A lot of times you can find pieces of rare yellow gear that contain the exact stats and bonuses that you want for a build, like plus skills, or if you need your crit or attack speed or whatever you need. Paying attention to the yellow drop seems pretty important. It's not like you're just waiting on legendary or above, especially with the imprint system where you can pull legendary aspects out of gear and then put it on rare pieces of gear. That's going to make you pay attention to rare pieces of gear, so I don't foresee me not paying attention to rare pieces of gear, which means I need to pick it up, which means my inventory is constantly filling up. But I think the biggest culprit and what makes inventory management a bit of a pain are the gems. They are just so annoying. They take up a massive amount of space in your bag. So there are 7 different types of gems, categories of gems, and if you're carrying one of each type, they'll just be taking up a fourth of your entire inventory, and that's not even accounting for the fact that there are these 7 types of gems, but there are multiple levels of gems. So you can have like 1, 2, 3 of just the yellow gems and 4 of the red gems. There's so many different gems. What this results in is you either have to keep going back to town to your stash to get rid of them, or you just keep the 7 gem types in your inventory constantly, and you just lose a fourth of your inventory the entire time, which just necessitates more trips back to town. I know I'm going to be picking up gear. It's a gear game. We need to look at gear. We need to see what we get to see if it's an improvement, but just get the gems out of there at least, so I'm not constantly dealing with either dumping them in my stash or losing a fourth of my inventory space. Please, please, please. The next big concern is the cash shop and the microtransactions. So they didn't have it in the review build, but they did give us a preview of it through a press kit. What we learned is that we've got that paid currency. You can buy them in bundles ranging from $2 all the way up to $100. In the $2 to $10 range, if you purchase those, every $1 basically equals 100 currency. But then at the $25 bundle and up, they start adding bonus free currency, with the extra most bonus currency coming from that $100 bundle. So if you're someone who likes getting the best value, you're going to be spending that $100. As for what it is you're buying, well, they have lived up to their words, supposedly, at this point, by just offering cosmetics, a bunch of different bundles. There are a lot of $8 bundles, which will be 3 pieces, things like the Death Throes and the Lion Share set. And then there's anything for the 8-piece bundles ranging from $23 all the way up to $28. These sets include the Death Toll, the Wraith Lord, the Fractured Magic, a lot of different cosmetics, taking up gear slots for every gear slot in each class. There's also cosmetics for the mounts, and then back pieces. There were markings or tattoos, basically. I also believe they sell tombstones, which is just the thing that pops up on the ground when you die. And then on top of that, there were these other purchases called add-ons. The Crypt Hunter add-on gave you a mount skin, a couple of cosmetics, and then 800 platinum. And then you could spend that platinum in the store, I guess, on one of those $8 bundles if you wanted to, or maybe buy some more if you wanted to buy one of those 8-piece $23 to $28 bundles. It's a cash shop. The fact that the highest bundles that we see right now is $28. There are worse cash shops, but again, this is also the cheapest version of Diablo 4, $70. What does it go up to, like $90 or $100 if you want the ultimate highest edition of the game? So having $30 skin bundles and knowing that we've got a season pass coming out that has 2 paid tiers, it's a lot of extra layers. Now, as I mentioned in the review, this is not a surprise. We knew this was coming, and they have at least lived up to the fact that they're just doing cosmetics. But now actually getting the price points on these things, it's just, when you add it all up, it is a bit of sticker shock. Like, there's a lot going on, but the argument, of course, is you don't have to buy these cosmetics, and the people who do buy cosmetics are going to be the ones supporting these seasonal updates that we're getting. It's I don't know, I don't love it, but I understand that as part of these live service games, this is the fuel that keeps the engine rolling, right? This is the thing that keeps the content coming, because otherwise they'll just take their money, peace out, and see us in 2 to 3 years when they release an expansion, and the updates we would get would be fairly minimal, a la what the seasonal updates were in Diablo 3, and that would just be the alternative situation. So this is what we have, this cash shop. Even though those are some pricey bundles, this is what is supposedly going to be making those seasonal updates that much more extensive, interesting, and have a lot more content. We'll see how that pans out as we get the first couple of seasons here post-release. And then my last major point of criticism, and this is actually probably one of my biggest and just general critiques across all of Diablo 4, is that it just doesn't seem to have a lot of innovation to kind of push the ARPG genre forward. Now, yes, they have built a really solid core game. It is a lot of fun to play. I like the systems. I like everything about playing and spending time with the game. And I love that they have this big seamless open world. They've done a lot well about bringing elements together here, and I think they've made a great core experience. But there have been very few moments that I feel like there was something happening in Diablo 4 that I hadn't really seen in another game. Or what's even more, as kind of mentioned when referring to the kind of limited set of boss mechanics that this game appears to have, it seems like it's even lacking in a lot of areas. This isn't to say that I don't appreciate this really solid, competent ARPG that I enjoy playing and I'm looking forward to playing, that's also open world, that has these MMO light elements. Those are cool. I just suppose I feel like I wish they could have taken some bigger swings, as I put it before, or tried a few new things to try to push things forward a little bit more. As it is, it does feel like they've played it a little safe. It is a good safe. It is a good thing that they've built. It's a good product. I like it. I'm looking forward to playing it. I guess I wish I would have had some more like, oh wow, look at that moments. And for the most part, I was never really surprised or taken aback by what I saw, as much as I do enjoy and appreciate it. So those are my major concerns. Quickly, I want to run through a few minor concerns. The max camera zoom, I just feel like it's a little close. This has been a common complaint. I'm not asking it to be back 50% or 100% more. I think even just 10 to 20% more pushed back. There's actually a lot of times while you're playing the game, the camera will pull back just a little bit. And once it does those, at those particular instances, I get this sense of relief, like, oh, this is where I want it. This is where I like the camera. But then shortly after you leave, whatever that point of interest is, the camera goes back to what I feel is a relatively tight and really kind of feeling a little claustrophobic at times. So just a little bit more back, I think, would be really good. The skill tree, I had this complaint in the beta, and it's still the case here. I feel like it's just a little clunky to navigate, especially respecking, where you have to pull points out of the end of the tree in order to change things in the earlier parts of the tree, because otherwise it's not going to let you remove points because it'll break the chain. I think there's a better way that can handle this, kind of like a work in progress mode, where you can confirm your build and not have to constantly move points from the end all the way to the beginning and then back to the end again. The low level class balance, this has been talked about a lot, but it's a little out of whack, specifically for the barbarians and druid. I know they get really strong at endgame, but make them feel a little less like last place as you're playing and leveling up, because they just feel like a bit of a slog in those early levels. And the overlay map, I've kind of turned a corner on this. At first I was like, whatever, these people are just complaining, but I don't know, if people want to play with the map laid over the screen, let's just let them, I guess, you know what I mean? Especially it's going to be mostly for the hardcore grinders, and so it's really not going to negatively impact the experience of your core casual base, which is a bulk of the people who are going to pick up and play Diablo 4. Now that we've run through that though, I really want to emphasize here that the good news is, even with all these critiques and criticisms, none of this stuff kills the game for me. The overall package, what Diablo 4 delivers, I really enjoy. I've really liked the game, and I'm really looking forward to playing it. These are just areas of improvement, I guess I would say, and some pain points that I think could be improved upon, things that could be better. And I just want to quickly wrap up by saying, here's some things that I'd like to see added within seasons or expansions or whenever. I'd love to see some larger scale encounters. So on the PvE side of things, I would love raids. I know a lot of people are against this, especially a lot of the core Diablo community. So if they never come to the game, I totally understand. But I think there's a way you could implement kind of group activities, and it doesn't need to be like 10 or 15 person raids, but like really challenging group content, even if it's just for like 3 to 4 people, where it requires a lot of coordination. It doesn't have to give the best rewards in the game, just make it so that it has an equal % chance to drop high level stuff as any other end game activity does. That would be a great alternative, rather than just making like, oh, you only get the best gear, or you only get the specific set from the raid activity or from that really challenging 4-man group activity. No, just make it equivalent and maybe reward special cosmetics, if nothing else, right? Unless you're just trying to sell those in the cash shop, in which case I understand Blizzard. But also talking about larger scale encounters, PvP, I would absolutely love some like big team-based objective things like capture the flag or zone controls or tower fights. Imagine some open world environments where you'd go in and they'd be like different factions, and depending on the faction that you were playing as, you would be battling the other faction. Call it light and dark. It's almost like another Diablo game did this already. And then you could just battle over control of towers, and then whoever one gets, it's like a tug of war pushing back and forth. There's so many cool things you could do with big scale PvP that I think would be great in Diablo 4. Speaking of which, I would love to see some more PvP modes, you know, things like arenas, solo arenas, or 2v2 or 3v3. I think it'd even be a great idea. Listen, we got normal and hardcore. What if there was just PvP? The whole game was PvP, right? You could play normal, where there was just PvP in Fields of Hatred. You could play hardcore, where if you die in PvE, or if you die in the Fields of Hatred, you're dead forever. What about PvP mode, where PvP open world is everywhere? That'd be pretty cool, I think. And then harder tier difficulties, like I mentioned, give us a tier 5. I'm sure that's coming at some point, I almost guarantee. And then lastly, just give us more cool legendaries. As it is, there's some pretty cool build modifying things, especially with the uniques. Just keep expanding that, keep adding more things that change abilities a lot, make it crazy. That is my hope. But there you go, that's gonna do it. Those are my biggest critiques, concerns for Diablo 4. Ultimately, the game's great. I cannot wait to play it. We are like a day away. I'm going to be blasting. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys there. These are things that could be better, in my opinion, and I hope at least some of these get addressed as time moves on. But that does it for me today. Thank you, as always, for watching. Hope you enjoyed the vid, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.